Tonight, cash-rich criminals losing their bling.
Most public in this country are law-abiding and they're sick and tired of seeing people profit from crime. They're delighted to see that we take cars, plasma screen TVs and cash off people they know are criminals.
And the payback for law-abiding citizens.
That's brilliant, it's absolutely brilliant. I mean, they're being naughty out there, they get caught, they take the money off them, it's brilliant. Put it straight back in the community, it really belongs. Excellent.
Good evening and welcome to the Tonight programme. Last year across the UK, the police seized over £150 million from those making their fortunes illegally. It seems that the 8-year-old Proceeds of Crime Act is now beginning to bite, as crooks are not only locked up, but also made to pay back their ill-gotten gains. Morland Sanders has met one successful police team cashing in the criminals.
A convicted criminal comes out of jail and the very next day they're out driving around in a flash car bought with dirty money. Is there anything more likely to rile the law-abiding among us? So what are the police doing to ensure crime doesn't pay?
These things cost an awful lot of money. This model, around £140,000. Now maybe it's just me being a little bit cynical or even slightly envious, but sometimes you just wonder where all that cash has come from. It could be a successful entrepreneur, a Premiership footballer, or maybe, just maybe, an international fraudster. And for the police these days, such high-value assets can be the key to a successful investigation.
Since 2002, the UK's had a piece of legislation called the Proceeds of Crime Act. It works like this. If someone can't prove their wealth has been earned by honest means, it all, lawfully, gets taken away from them, every last penny. In the criminal justice system, it's a process known as asset recovery. However, in the early years, the law proved difficult to enforce, with criminals hiding their cash in front companies and offshore accounts. In recent months, though, the tables have turned, with police economic crime teams targeting suspected fraudsters like this one. He may not look much, but according to the cops, he has illegal assets worth £100,000. Tonight has been given extensive access to the work of the West Midlands Asset Recovery Team, seeing how they're now using the legislation to force convicted criminals to hand over their high-value assets.
Over the last 18 months, we've actually confiscated or restrained around about £15 million, plus on top of that we've seized £5 million in cash. In addition to that, we've seized over £8 million in the last 12 months with confiscation orders.
8 million just in the last year alone?
Absolutely, yes. A phenomenal piece of legislation and some very hard work.
And I notice we've got 3 shiny examples of the assets that you have seized. This is a Bentley, isn't it? Worth how much?
This Bentley, I think, is worth around about £150,000.
And the one that's caught my eye over here, this is a Lamborghini Gallardo, isn't it?
It's enough to catch anybody's eye, and around about £160,000 I think that car is worth.
And finally, the black BMW?
BMW, I think, is a more reasonable, yet still expensive £80,000.
Can I hop in?
Please do, be my guest.
So what do these guys think when you turn up and take their shiny bling away from them?
I think criminals always accept there's a risk of being arrested and actually being prosecuted and going to jail. The one thing criminals do not accept and do not expect is actually for the police to come along and take their cars, seize their money from their bank accounts, take their houses even in certain cases as well. They do not expect to lose the bling, shall we say.
Currently, these super luxury cars have been impounded following a major fraud investigation. If their owners can't prove that they used legitimate money to buy them, these cars will be put on the market, and ultimately the cash raised will come back to us, the taxpayer, when they're sold. Under the Proceeds of Crime Act, it's a debt the criminal will still owe even after being released from prison. The last thing you want is somebody coming out of a 12-month jail sentence and driving home in the Lamborghini, because other people may think that's a fair deal.
It is immensely important to me and policing that isn't the case, as we will take the car as well. The point of it being is crime does not pay in that sense at all.
It's an often complex world of dirty money, false names and foreign bank accounts. And each case poses a unique challenge to discover where the criminal has stashed their cash.
The hunt for young girls trapped in prostitution. Female police officers from across the West Midlands descending on a suspected brothel.
When the West Midlands Police received intelligence that a notorious massage parlour was exploiting trafficked women for prostitution, its response was swift and sure. A dedicated squad of 50 female officers was assembled for an early evening raid on the property.
A young policewoman walked in on two people having sex in one of the rooms there. There were used condoms in bins. It quite clearly was operating as a brothel.
19 young women from 10 different countries were taken away not as criminals but as victims. A man called Carl Pritchett was later given a 2-year prison sentence for running the brothel, and a Hungarian couple were locked up for people trafficking. But another major investigation was about to get underway. Asset recovery cops were stunned at Pritchett's massive illegal profits from the sex trade, money he'd hidden all around the world.
Carl sits in the middle, and we have this sort of ridiculous arrangement here where nothing is straightforward. There's money at various different points going to Malaysia, going back to Spain, out of Spain, to
Isle
the
of Man,
Thailand, Gibraltar. Mr. Pritchett was buying property in Thailand at the time he was arrested.
And I see here cars as well.
At the time he was arrested, he was effectively in a queue to buy an Aston Martin.
Expensive tastes. I noticed this other one as well, a Ferrari 355. Was Carl Pritchett paying any tax?
The tax office had no record for him, either in his real name, Carl Pritchett, or his alias names, which were Carl Richards, Colin Mason and Carl Richards with a K.
Initial inquiries suggested that Carl Pritchett may have had up to £10 million tied up in property, assets and fraudulent bank accounts, all hidden behind the shady set of suspect companies. And when you look at this complex web, do you think Carl Pritchett is a clever man?
Well, I think he's clever. He's a sophisticated person that realised that he needed to protect his assets. He did that by creating very, very convoluted methods of moving his money around, and he used various different vehicles to keep a distance from that money. So it was very difficult to say that belongs to Carl Pritchett, because on the face of it, he owned virtually nothing.
It was companies that linked to him that owned all the assets?
Companies and individuals, and I was very lucky that I managed to obtain in the region of 35-40 different files from solicitors, which showed probably a great deal more than you'd expect to see. You know, certain handwritten notes on those files tended to indicate that there was more to it than met the eye.
Under the Proceeds of Crime Act, Pritchett was ordered to pay up £2 million worth of provable assets. But earlier this month he failed to meet a deadline to hand over the cash, so was sentenced to 7 more years behind bars, more than tripling his original sentence. It's that no-nonsense approach which senior police officers hope will unnerve the crooks and play well with a public fed up of seeing criminals flaunt their wealth.
It's amazing when you see it and just recognise this is all criminal property, criminal benefits.
And if you look at the cars, I bet we've got up to £1 million without that, if you include the motorbikes.
I would say so, yeah. And all of them, as you see, very high-powered, high-valued and criminal property.
I met with the Association of Chief Police Officers spokesman on asset recovery at one of a number of secret police stores around the country. It was packed with goods seized from criminals under the Proceeds of Crime Act, or POCA as it's sometimes referred to.
Well, you know, most public in this country are law-abiding and they're sick and tired of seeing people profit from crime. We know how hard it is to convict people for crime, and the public wants to know not only do we convict them and put them away with a meaningful sentence, but actually we take away some of that profit they've made. And the response we get from communities around POCA is that they're delighted to see that we take cars, plasma screen TVs and cash off people they know are criminals.
How useful are these regional asset recovery teams? Are the criminals finding a way round the Proceeds of Crime Act?
Of course they are. People will do all they can to hide wealth. There's a massive ways which clearly I wouldn't talk to you about, but the bottom line is, I think our job, and it's incumbent upon me and people leading the organisations to make sure we can get around them. You know, it's, to a certain extent, it's a cat and mouse activity, but the better we get at enforcement and investigation, the more they have to hide. And there comes a point when, if you hide your wealth so much, what's the point having it?
And for the West Midlands Asset Recovery Team, they want to take things a step further with a forthcoming high-profile advertising campaign. It's aimed at both embarrassing the criminals and encouraging honest people to blow the whistle on any neighbours who seem to have the assets of a millionaire and a job that pays the minimum wage.
Basically, the whole idea around it is actually to make people understand the implications of what we're going to do. And the posters are very pictorial examples of that. And hit things such as that one there. I mean, the indication is around places available at school. The point being, yes, that children at private schools, funded through crime, they're going, because we will take the benefit away. That one there, the cars, which we've already alluded to, and also the houses there. And it's just to give that sort of graphical image so people understand this is coming, we are here and we're going to take it.
And you could lose everything.
They will lose everything, yes.
But while most police asset recovery work is about depriving criminals of their ill-gotten gains, sometimes proceeds of crime legislation can be used to frighten crooks into giving back important valuables that they've stolen. Take the Johnson family gang, for example. Key players: Ricky, Michael, Danny, Albie and Chad. Police suspected that members of the gang were behind a spate of brazen raids on cash points in shops and banks. Most usually, the heist would involve taking the whole ATM, with a little help from another 3 letters describing a machine: JCB. No trouble remembering your PIN code for these withdrawals. But it wasn't just the cash point that was stolen. A local building company would wake up to find expensive plant was missing. Stolen 4x4s were used for those late-night unexpected withdrawals. Although the police strongly suspected they were all involved in the raids, there was only enough evidence to successfully prosecute Danny. Some of the Johnson gang also dabbled in scrap metal, but for it to be scrap, first of all it had to be liberated from a local warehouse, and if security doors ever proved a bit troublesome, a strong chain strapped to the getaway van usually did the trick. Chad and Danny were convicted of that crime. The police believed they were dealing with hardened, dangerous criminals who were quite happy to put the rest of us at risk when the long arm of the law got within touching distance. This high-speed, high-risk car chase followed an attempted burglary. The Subaru was later found abandoned, and Michael's DNA was discovered on a cigarette stub inside the vehicle. He was questioned, but released without charge.
A huge haul of antiques worth millions of pounds has been stolen in what could turn out to be one of Britain's biggest robberies.
However, there was one series of high-value stately home burglaries across England that would mark the gang's dramatic downfall, and the Proceeds of Crime Act was to prove instrumental in the police investigation.
It's been identified that the properties were cased. One of the issues with some of the properties is that they'd be open to the public. People could get in there, look what was in the property. In other cases, they're